We got a big week coming up in fantasy football, and unfortunately, the injury bug just will not let us catch a break at the wide receiver position. So we got to get into everything. All I ask is that you go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Get into our first tier here. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. Honestly, with the exception of maybe Justin Jefferson, I would say rank these guys however you want to. Honestly, they're all so freaking good and just above the rest in fantasy. Justin Jefferson at Los Angeles on Thursday night just makes the most sense to me to put him at number one. Justin Jefferson has already been just his normal spectacular self. Sam Darnold is able to supply him with major fantasy upside still. So against a weaker defense, I just believe that this one absolutely comes to fruition. Jamar Chase versus Philly also makes a ton of sense to me. Look, the Bengals moving the ball by passing to players. Jamar Chase is having a big year. T. Higgins is having a big year. You know what else is happening? They're both in contract years, so that's going to continue here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Got tons of confidence. Tyreek Hill getting Tua back. That is the key words right there. That's everything that matters. It has been so long since I've been able to rank Tyreek Hill inside of the top 5, inside the top 3. And that's why we're talking about it today, because it is so important. That's all that matters. If Tyreek Hill has Tua, he has top 3 upside. He has number 1 upside in fantasy football. He's getting him back by all accounts. Tua's practice window is being opened up, and the hope is that he comes back on Sunday versus the Arizona Cardinals here. I will love it if I see it. We obviously need to watch this one because Tyreek Hill could be up here at number 3, but if Tua doesn't come back, he's dropping all the way back to like 25 range. And then AJ Brown versus the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati makes tons of sense to me as well. Bad secondary, able to capitalize. AJ Brown has been fantastic this year. He's almost averaging 20 fantasy points and a half PPR format. He's been spectacular. I love AJ Brown always and anytime, but especially this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. Dropping down to our next tier, we've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 5 and Drake London at number 6 this week. Amon-Ra St. Brown taking on the Tennessee Titans again. It makes a ton of sense to have him here. Amon-Ra St. Brown and this Detroit offense, they're finally starting to hit their groove again. And what's good about these rankings this week is that I feel like the big name guys, the guys that we're used to seeing at the top, they're coming back up to the top. Amon-Ra St. Brown the past several weeks been very, very good in fantasy. You can continue to count on this from Amon-Ra heading into this week versus Tennessee Titans because the Titans defense, they're just getting beaten down by not having much offense. So all the Detroit Lions have to do is stay on the field, and even if it takes just like 2 or 3 quarters for this to get out of hand, Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be a good play. Drake London at number 6 at Tampa Bay. This one makes a lot of sense to me too. First of all, Drake London had his massive breakout party against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just several weeks ago on Thursday Night Football. It was awesome to watch. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I will admit, they looked better against the Ravens as a collective unit, but their defense was still getting shredded through the air. Lamar Jackson had 5 passing touchdowns. Kirk Cousins and Drake London, I think they're lighting up the Bucs again this week. And Malik Nabers at number 7 at the Pittsburgh Steelers to round this tier out. Malik Nabers had a down week last week. Honestly, big whoop, right? Like, this guy, aside from last week, has been phenomenal in fantasy football. I can take one bad week. Obviously, the ultimate concern all year with Malik Nabers, for me and for everybody else, has been what Daniel Jones can do. Because we know Daniel Jones, like, he had been playing really good. But we all know, like at the snap of a finger, that dude can start absolutely playing like garbage. And he did against the Philadelphia Eagles. So against a hotter team, hotter defense right now with Pittsburgh, it definitely will be one to watch. But Malik Nabers, to me, I just think this offense is too smartly run to not figure this one out this week. I've got Malik Nabers at 7. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got Jaden Reed at number 8 and CeeDee Lamb at number 9. Now with both these guys, you could again rank these two however you want to. At this point for me though, I gotta go with Jaden Reed because Jaden Reed, listen, the last couple weeks haven't been great for Jaden. I think he's dealing with an injury. He's always kind of questionable heading into the week with an ankle injury. So I think that one's definitely still lingering around with Jaden Reed. But the matchup against Jacksonville, it just makes way too much sense not to have Jaden Reed in the top 10. Jaden Reed is still important to this offense. Do not let the past 2 weeks fool you. They just have used other wide receivers because he's been a little unhealthy. I think this is a good get-right game for Jaden Reed at the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. And with CeeDee Lamb, the guy I called a buy low candidate this week, I don't think this is his best week. I think CeeDee Lamb come next week, probably around top 5 again for me. But this week against the San Francisco 49ers, a banged up team, but a team that doesn't allow much passing yards to go on. I think this is going to be a rougher game for CeeDee Lamb, while I do believe that he is going to get you a solid 15 to 16 fantasy points because he's so constantly targeted. I don't think this is CeeDee Lamb's massive rebound game, to say the least here. Debo Samuel at number 10 and Brian Thomas Jr. at number 11. Debo Samuel Jr., obviously watch out for this one. The guy didn't end up playing for the majority of that game on Sunday versus the Chiefs because he had an illness. I read that he was actually hospitalized because of like he had fluid in his lungs or something like that. Definitely going to be one to watch here with Debo Samuel. But long story short, if he plays out of necessity, what else can they do? They have no more Brandon Ayuk. That's it. George Kittle's injured now too. This team is dropping like freaking flies. It's insane. It is insanity what they're putting in that San Francisco water. So if Debo Samuel plays, has to be top 10 this week versus one of the worst, if not the worst secondaries in the entire league. Yeah, I've got to go with Debo if he plays, but make sure to watch out for this one. Brian Thomas Jr. at number 6 versus Green Bay also makes a ton of sense to me. Brian Thomas Jr., listen, this dude has been incredible. Like, this has been one of the quietest, like, top-tier rookies in fantasy football this year because he plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? But this guy is averaging 13.5 fantasy points per game in a half PPR format. He's got 4 receiving touchdowns, and it's very sustainable. They're always targeting this guy in the red zone or on deep plays. That's Brian Thomas Jr. He is doing everything for this Jacksonville offense right now. So as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't stop against the Green Bay Packers. Much more aggressive defense than what they played last week versus New England. But Green Bay's defense is definitely beatable through the air. And I've got Brian Thomas Jr. at number 11. And to round out the tier, Cooper Kupp, we all believe at least, he's making his return this week versus the Minnesota Vikings on Thursday night. This is the reports that we've seen. He's coming back. Now, the one thing to watch here is that Todd McVay did say, depending on how the week goes in practice, he may be on a pitch count. We'll see how the week goes. That'll dictate whether he's on a pitch count or not. So obviously keep an eye on this one. But again, do not forget what Cooper Kupp has done this year. This dude had like 20 targets in week 2. He was really good in week 1. Week 3 is when he got the injury. So he's been out since then, but you can't take away those first 2 games from Cooper Kupp. He's been the number 1 wide receiver with or without Puka Nacua this year. Cooper Kupp this week against the Vikings defense. Definitely a tough defense, but the Detroit Lions just showed last week they're a beatable team. So if they get Cooper Kupp back, I expect the Rams to maybe not win this game, but definitely to put up some points, and Cooper Kupp being a main factor of it. And I'm also really sure that Matt Stafford is definitely going to hit his projection on Underdog this week with 0.5 total yards. If you haven't taken advantage of Underdog yet and you want to get in on this Matt Stafford free projection this week, go down in the comments, grab the link that's there. Use code FN to sign up for Underdog. 50% deposit match, up to 1,000 in bonus cash, what they'll give you. As long as you take advantage of this sweat-free projection right here, you're going to get all of that. So make sure to go down there in the comments, grab the link that's there, use code FN to do it. Dropping down to our next tier right here. Stefon Diggs at number 13 and DeVonta Adams at number 14. With Stefon Diggs, bad week last week. You know, it's really funny. It's like, why? Bad things always happen when Stefon Diggs tries to poke the bear before the game. And that's exactly what he did last week against the Green Bay Packers. Before the game even started, he tried to fight all of them. And it didn't end up good in fantasy football. This week, it's obviously much different. They're taking on the Colts here, who they're not a very good defense as is, but the Colts defense will definitely give up more points to the Houston Texans this week than what the Packers did last week. This team's going to come in mad. CJ Stroud didn't even throw for 100 yards. And Stefon Diggs, realistically, is just still that number 1. Tank Dell doesn't look good. They've got no choice but to throw to Stefon Diggs. I've got him here at 13. And then my 2 New York Jets wide receivers. Still can't separate these 2. They both had 9 targets last week. And I get it. Wilson was definitely much better in fantasy. But here's the thing. With Garrett Wilson, he dropped 2 big targets for the New York Jets. One of them ended up in the Pittsburgh Steelers defender's hands. Rodgers doesn't like that. And if you've got any doubt at this point whether Aaron Rodgers is running this team or not, I don't know what to freaking tell you. This team is Aaron Rodgers' team, and that's exactly the way he wants to run it. Davante Adams, in my opinion, is still just the better option between the Jets wide receivers at this point. They get a freebie this week taking on the Patriots, so both of them are definitely good options. They're back-to-back here for a reason, but I still do prefer Davante Adams slightly over Garrett Wilson right now. And then to round out the tier, Amari Cooper at number 16 at the Seattle Seahawks. Welcome back to fantasy relevance, my man Amari Cooper. So excited for this one right here. Amari Cooper is finally not just relevant, This is a high-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy football. Against the Seattle Seahawks this week, I love the matchup, first of all. The Falcons got steamrolled by them last week, but the reality is the Buffalo Bills, it's not going to go down the same way. Buffalo their offense is going to come together more and more each week. Amari Cooper didn't even play 40% of the snaps last week for the Buffalo Bills, and he ended up in the end zone. Amari Cooper, once it all gets working, he's going to be really good in fantasy, and I see another good week against the Seattle Seahawks this week. Dropping down to our next tier right here. T. Higgins at 17 and Zay Flowers at 18. T. Higgins has been money in fantasy football this year. Versus the Philadelphia Eagles, love the matchup, first of all. And second of all, like I said, this Bengals team is having trouble establishing the run on a weekly basis. So what they're doing all the time is they're getting both those receivers involved. And again, T. Higgins is on a contract year. He's playing this well because he's really motivated. Not to say that he's not a good player as is, but T. Higgins is really turning up the volume here this year in particular. So you want T. Higgins in fantasy football this week against the Eagles here. And then Zay Flowers here at the Cleveland Browns. Keep an eye on this one because Zay Flowers did end up kind of limping around after he got a really nice catch and run versus the Bucs on Monday night, but he was able to return to the game and he was still involved. So I don't think it's going to be an issue, and if it's not an issue, the Browns matchup is great. Zay Flowers, again, it's hard to predict week to week. He has a really low floor and a really high ceiling. So what kind of game is it? I like the matchup against Cleveland. That's why he's a little bit up in my rankings this week. And then DeVonta Smith at 19. DeVonta Smith at 19 at the Cincinnati Bengals here. Love the matchup again. I called him a buy low trade target this week as well. I think this opportunity is fantastic for you to buy low. This is a guy who's coming off a really bad week, and he's taking on one of the best secondaries to remedy that. Like, this is one of the best cures for a bad game is to go up against a bad secondary as a receiver, and this is a great opportunity for DeVonta Smith this week. I've got DeVonta Smith having a good bounce back game. Honestly, this is kind of his floor right here, and if his ceiling he hits, he's probably going to be a top 10 to top 5 guy this week. Dropping down to our next tier right here. Jennings takes over at 20, and DJ Moore is at number 21. Jennings, watch out for this one. He, like everybody else who has a pulse on the 49ers team, is dealing with injury. He didn't play in Week 7 against the Kansas City Chiefs, and hopefully he comes back. Dude, we freaking need you. I mean, everything lines up. Literally everything lines up. So the way I look at it is this. If Jennings plays, 20 is basically his floor, similar to DeVonta Smith. He's got upside for much more. But if he doesn't play versus the Dallas Cowboys, Ricky Pearsall jumps into this spot right here. So keep an eye on this injury right here. We are praying to the fantasy football gods that Jennings plays because the matchup upside versus Dallas is pretty spectacular. DJ Moore at 21 at Washington. Coming off the bye week, I like the matchup potential here. One thing I'll note is this. The Commanders' defense may be better than some of us think. They are shutting down really bad teams, and they've given up big points to good teams. Chicago, I'll get flack for saying this. I don't know what they are yet, to be honest with you. I don't know if they're actually good or if it's a little bit of a fugazi right now. One thing's for sure, DJ Moore is not consistently the wide receiver 1. So I think that his ceiling is obviously really freaking high, but it's not every week that we get that. So DJ Moore at 21 here for a very specific reason. I don't trust the upside always being there with him yet. Marvin Harrison Jr. at 22 and Jalen Waddle resurfaces at 23. Listen, Marvin has been a disappointment. I mean, honestly, Marvin has really disappointed me because this guy, it's not just that he's not getting opportunities. He's getting opportunities. This guy is just not looking very good with opportunities. He's 6'4", freaking huge, and he's not boxing out defenders. He's not aggressive at the point of attack at the ball. It's sad to watch, honestly, because this guy should be much better. I like the matchup this week at Miami, but I've got issues with Marvin that I didn't used to have because his effort just doesn't look as much as it should be there. And then Jalen Waddle, again, Tua Tagovailoa changes everything. This is so nice if we actually get Tua back this week. Again, watch this one, but versus Arizona could be a pretty good matchup here. So Jalen Waddle, obviously it's hard to forget that he has massive big play upside, but you will see it once again once he actually plays with Tua. And I think it could be this week against Arizona. He comes out and he has a big game, but definitely his floor is always still low because of Tyreek Hill. And then George Pickens round the tier out. I'll tell you guys this. I was wrong about Pickens. Obviously, Russell and him actually had a really good connection. Russell was hitting him on deep balls here. Definitely encouraging for sure. I will say this. I'm not sold on this one at all. There was a lot of those balls that George Pickens was plucking out of the air himself, and he's really good. I'll give him credit for that. Giants defense is better than the Jets. It really is. I mean, the Jets defense is not very good anymore. So the Giants defense matchup, that scares me on Monday night. I think George Pickens is going to be a fine play, but this guy, don't forget, very similar to Zay Flowers, even worse so, is just so hot and cold. Some weeks he'll give you good weeks. This is not like some remedy that we just discovered. This is not a cure for anything. Russell Wilson is not going to be supplying George Pickens with those type of performances every single week. So I've got George Pickens still pretty comfortable here at 24, obviously with the ceiling of a top 15 to top 12 guy. Dropping down to our last tier, Jackson Smith-Njigba at 25 and Jordan Addison at 26. Jackson Smith-Njigba is the primary beneficiary, in my opinion, without DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, if you have not heard, is expected to be week to week. He's deemed as week to week. And anytime anyone's deemed as week to week, chances are very, very high they're not playing the next week. So DK Metcalf probably out this week versus the Buffalo Bills. The matchup should be okay. I mean, they should have opportunities here. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, obviously the only problem with him is that he's just not getting enough downfield targets. Well, the good news is that they're going to have to do it now without DK Metcalf. Their main downfield play, he's out of this game. So I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba actually is a really good opportunity this week. Jordan Addison at 26, listen, at the Los Angeles Rams, I think this matchup is fantastic. I really, really do. But Jordan Addison, there still just is a problem without volume. Like, Sam Darnold, maybe not good enough to supply two legit wide receivers in fantasy. I think on a week-to-week basis, Jordan Addison is going to be really good depending on matchup. He's here this week because of the matchup. I think it's a great matchup. This is probably a floor play right here at 26, but I do believe he has major upside to be a top 15 wide receiver this week. The big play upside is definitely there. The Rams defense is definitely beatable through the air. So I love the matchup on Thursday night, but Jordan Addison definitely makes me nervous because it kind of reminds me of Jalen Waddle thing where the targets just aren't consistently there. Wan'Dale Robinson at 27 feels really good, and Terry McLaurin at 28 feels really bad. Wan'Dale Robinson at 27 at Pittsburgh. Listen, the dude just continues to perform. If you got a PPR league, Wan'Dale Robinson is legit. He is a legit flex play every single week. Targets don't leave Wan'Dale. And the good thing is, whether it's Drew Lock or whether it's Daniel Jones, probably will be Daniel Jones. It doesn't matter. Like, Wan'Dale Robinson runs everything close to the line of scrimmage. Able to hit. Daniel Jones is able to hit those routes. So it's very sustainable production, and he's able to make things happen after the catch. So Wan'Dale Robinson, his role is set in stone. Not a super high upside guy because he's not a downfield play, but definitely he's going to get you 10 to 14 targets on a per game basis because the guy is all over the shallow end of the field for his quarterback to hit high percentage throws. Wan'Dale Robinson is a solid play against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Terry definitely feels bad. Obviously, if Jaden Daniels plays, Terry goes up to top 15, top 12 area. Obviously, let's make that very, very clear. But without Jaden Daniels, if it's Marcus Mariota for a full game versus the Chicago Bears, that's not a good formula, guys. Listen, I get it. He just did really well with Marcus Mariota, but that was versus the Carolina Panthers. This is not exactly apples to apples here. This is apples to like watermelon. It's like they are not close to the same level of defense. Chicago's defense versus the pass is phenomenal. They're shutting down everybody. So without Jaden Daniels, it makes me very, very little. It gives me very little hope for Terry here. So obviously watch this one throughout the week. But even so, if he has Jaden, he's probably not going past top 12 or top 14 because this defensive matchup is one of the toughest, if not the toughest in the entire league. And then to round us out, 29 is Tyler Lockett, 30 is Xavier Worthy. Tyler Lockett, again, he is definitely almost on the same level playing field as Jackson Smith-Njigba, but he has himself been dealing with some sort of injuries over the last several weeks here. He's not exactly a clean bill of health. The Buffalo Bills matchup should give him opportunities, and Geno's going to be able to put up points like he always does with his fantasy receivers here. But Tyler Lockett definitely is not, I'm not as confident on him as I am with Jackson Smith-Njigba because Jackson Smith-Njigba I know we're getting all the targets from. With Tyler Lockett, sometimes it's hot and cold. So Tyler Lockett's still definitely a top 30 guy this week. I just prefer Jackson Smith-Njigba. And then Xavier Worthy at 30. At the Las Vegas Raiders, the matchup is a screaming matchup. I love the matchup so much here, and I get it. Worthy was not exactly the most involved last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. He was not their guy. It was McCall Hardman for a lot of that game. Juju Smith-Schuster he's already been ruled out in this game. And this is also a perfect game for Xavier Worthy to have a big game because the Raiders are a joke. They're a disgrace on defense. So the Raiders, I think, is just a great matchup for Xavier Worthy to take advantage of. And as I do at the end of every single rankings video, I give you my favorite underdog wide receiver play of the week if you are going into an underdog best ball draft this week. And this one makes tons of sense to me. He already did it one time this year. He's doing it again in week 8. Darnell Mooney versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. I love this matchup. Tampa Bay's defense continues to get shredded through the air. They just gave up 5 touchdown passes to Lamar Jackson. Well, they gave up 500 yards to Kirk Cousins not too long back, and I think that this is a great opportunity for Darnell Mooney to have another massive game with about 10 to 15 targets in this game. So let me know how your lineup is looking so far this week, and if you want to see the best buy low trade targets this week, click on this video right here.